y'all hear me okay? Very good. Okay, great. Well,
Yeah,
thanks
no problem.
everyone. Awesome. We're gonna jump into it. So my name is Erin Kaiser. I'm the director of the Land for the Commons program here at the Industrial Commons. If you're joining this session this afternoon or found this information on our website, I'm going to assume you already have some familiarity with our organization, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But I just want to offer a little background on the project, provide some context of why we're here today and why we've started out on this process. So as y'all probably know, the Industrial Commons starts and scales employee-owned social enterprises and industrial cooperatives. And we support frontline workers to build a new Southern working class that erases the inequities of generational poverty with the aim of building a future and economy for everyone. So as our organization has grown since its inception in 2015, we've recognized the need for more mid-sized manufacturing that was geared not just for the businesses themselves, but also really to facilitate learning and how those businesses work, how they could work differently, and in a way that really centers people, equity, and sustainability. So we had a good fortune of working with an anonymous donor who helped us acquire this property. It's just under 30 acres. And as you can see from this map, it's right in the heart truly of downtown Morganton. This map shows the two parcels that the Industrial Commons currently owns. One is a smaller 10-acre parcel that's going to be a future housing site. And the larger one is 30 acres that is the focus of this conversation today. So this parcel has a really long history in our community. It's known in Burke County as the old Drexel 3 and 5 site. And for over 100 years, a lot of people worked here and they produced really high quality furniture that was sold around the world. But in the early 2000s, that business was left behind and the facility that was left actually burned to the ground. So for nearly 15 years, the site has been abandoned and it's left behind both an eyesore and also some potential risk for pollution and contamination. As a nonprofit, we really occupy a very unique position. A lot of other private developers wouldn't take on this kind of risk because as a nonprofit, we can avail ourselves to some of the government funding and philanthropic money that's out there. We're excited about the opportunity of really breathing new life into this site. So some of our early philanthropic funding really helped us start to create a vision and a plan for what might happen here. That allowed us to hire Methune, who's our lead architect on this project. And they've really brought together an incredible team of engineers and designers helping us come up with a really world-class plan for what can happen here. And we're going to pull behind the curtain just a little bit, give you guys a peek of that before I turn it over to Brian. So the current plan right now is kind of two buildings. The first one is going to be focused on manufacturing space for accelerating organization and entrepreneurs who are working in the green circular textile space. So these folks who are coming out of the startup space need room to expand. And then we're also going to have a lot of skill training in these facilities as well. The second building to the south is really going to focus a lot on our youth-oriented events and programming that have more space to expand kind of all the educational work that we do. In addition to all of this important work that's happening inside the buildings, we really see this as an opportunity to heal the land from its current condition and create a thriving ecosystem. We know that manufacturing work is hard, it can be repetitive, and it's really important to take a break, to go outside, to breathe a little fresh air. So we're excited about the opportunity of really making this a safe place to do that, and also to welcome the community to events, to use this more park-like spaces that will be outside the buildings. Over time, we're really hoping that as folks come out of this accelerator building and are growing their businesses, we're going to build even more manufacturing spaces on the eastern side of the parcel. So over time, those will really be able to expand and grow. And so we think there's a real opportunity to be a real driver of economic development, both in Burke County and throughout kind of this part of North Carolina and Southern Appalachia. So we're really excited about the opportunity and our plans and really the momentum it's going to have for all of our region. But before any of that can happen, we have to make sure the site is clean. So to that end, we applied to EPA for a Brownfield cleanup grant, and we're really thrilled to be awarded that money. And so that funding is helping TIC, as the owner of the property, enlist Stantec and Buckeye Elm. They've created a really incredible plan for us to make sure we get all the right stuff cleaned up and out of the way, so this is safe, and so we can have a really wonderful development moving forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, who's going to walk us through what the cleanup plans for and how that's going to get executed.
Yes, thank you. Give me 1 second. I will share my screen for a few slides as well. And hopefully that comes up. Everybody can see that. Okay.
Looks good.
Unfortunately, I cannot. No, it ended up going into a different an interesting screen on my side. In any case, yes, welcome to the kickoff meeting for the cleanup of the former Drexel 3 and 5 site. It's located in Morganton, North Carolina. As Aaron was saying, I think her aerial photo of operations was a little bit earlier than mine. This, I have been told, was sometime in the mid-80s at basically the height of its operation across the site, as you can see in the background. Lots of industrial use across the property. And so Burke County, North Carolina had applied for and received an EPA community-wide brownfield assessment grant. I think back in about 2018, 2017, 2018 timeframe. And this site was assessed initially using those grant funds from EPA. So we're very appreciative of EPA in Burke County as far as being able to assess the sites and moving forward from that perspective. So what we want to talk a little bit, I'll give you a brief history of some of the assessment, the cleanup application as we discussed, and then some of the cleanup as we move forward. I want to introduce to you the cleanup contractors that we've hired, Buckeye Elm, and if anybody has any questions directly for them, should be a relatively straightforward process, but there may be questions, and so please, we want you to feel free to reach out and ask anything that you want. So just a brief assessment history. During that assessment phase, using Burke County's grant, we identified a very large underground storage tank out at the site. It was listed at 47,500 gallons worth of fuel oil. We have since measured that it's possibly larger than that. So this is one of the areas of concern for cleanup out at the property. Soil and groundwater sampling for various contaminants really didn't show very much across the site. We were pleasantly surprised. We were hoping that this would be the case, and it was true. So relatively clean in the areas that we sampled. We purposely sampled across the site in areas that we felt would have the most contamination, gross contaminants from operations at the site through the years, and we're very fortunate to find that mostly the only thing identified was that underground storage tank. There is some residual coal. It was coal fire powered at one time, and so there is still a residual coal pile that exists that we want to remove from the site. And then there are piles of debris, building debris across the site that most likely contain asbestos. So that's what we did from an assessment perspective. After the assessments were completed, we completed this analysis of brownfield cleanup alternatives, which is essentially more or less a feasibility study on what kind of cleanups need to be done at the site. And at about that time is when TIC became interested in the property for their campus expansion and their innovation campus project. And so we worked with TIC to complete the phase 1 environmental site assessment, and then go through the process of submitting the grant application that, as Aaron noted, was awarded last year, and we're currently in that period of performance under the grant. So in this photo, this is the large underground storage tank area here. It's brown. I apologize. I think I took this picture in about December. So, but you get a good idea. But this is the size of the tank here. In an aerial, oh, I apologize. This did not come out very well. It looks a little bit grainy, but in this, from an aerial view, you can, we've circled here the areas. This is the underground storage tank area that's near the old dust cyclone collector. The former coal storage area is near here, because this is also where a lot of the mechanical areas were. You can see in some of the other older aerial photos a smokestack in this area as well, and some other things of that nature. And then as we've circled, there are these sort of piles of debris across the site that contain some asbestos. So these are the areas that we're focusing on from a cleanup perspective. And then we went through an RFP process earlier this year. We evaluated 5 submissions from qualified environmental contractors out at the site. And based on pricing and qualifications, we have selected Buckeye Elm Contracting to help out at the site with the underground storage tank removal and the other aspects of the project as well. Mark May will be the project manager on site, and Matt Gillis with Buckeye Elm. They're on the line if anybody has any questions directly for them. And I just introducing those guys and see if there are any questions when we get to the end. And then again, this is kind of our plan as we move forward. There's these 3 sort of areas that we're focusing on using the cleanup grant funding. Is the underground storage tank removal area here, the coal pile, which you don't get a good view of, not a great picture, but this is the area where it is on site. And then again, the piles of asbestos debris across the property. And that is basically it in a nutshell. It's really pretty short and sweet. We have one thing to clear with Norfolk Southern Railroad, and we have a meeting with them later this week. So we should be good to go from there. We're anticipating that we're going to be good to go because that underground storage tank area is near the Norfolk Southern right of way on the northern side of the property. So we need to make sure everything is clear with them. And after that, we'll start getting work on the schedule, but we anticipate somewhere in the next 3 to 4 weeks to be out there. So that is pretty much all I have.
How much asbestos, how much of that material that was left is laced with asbestos, Brian? Are you able to tell?
We don't know exactly, Alan, and it's so strewn and not consolidated in one place that we don't really have a good idea. Now, you know, the one good thing here is that a lot of the material, at least that we can see visually at the outset, does not appear to have a lot of mixed asbestos debris. It is mostly timber and concrete and brick. Again, that we can see. There may be areas that we've not been able to assess yet until things start being moved around. But relatively small amount. I think under this grant we have slated, if we find up to about 1,500 yards worth of material. I might be overstating that, but and that's a lot. That's a lot of material. So
I would be having walked it, I would be surprised that I think there's just more loose rubble and material than there is asbestos.
yeah,
Mixed up.
That's what we believe, and we've not seen any evidence so far of any what we call thermal system insulation, TSI, which tends to be the most friable type of asbestos. Most things that we have found there are presumed asbestos just because of the age of the structure, and mostly from a roofing perspective. So.
Thanks, Brian, for that overview. I'm wondering if you might be able to speak in just a little bit more detail about the process for doing the underground storage tank. I know it's a pretty gigantic tank, and there's a bit of a process to that. Could you just lay that out? Just kind of.
Yeah, let me actually. I'll go back up to this photo here that has not great detail, but this is the outline of where the tank is located, and it's subgrade. So we've measured that this is about 16 feet in diameter from the surface to the bottom of the tank. We anticipate that there's still somewhere around 10 to 15,000 gallons of product in the tank itself. We know that there's some type of fuel oil in there to start with. So what's going to happen is we'll come and pump out as much of that tank as we possibly can in the outset. We'll also uncover all of this concrete to get a better idea of the exact construction of the tank. We're we're not 100% sure if it's a cylindrical tank or if it's maybe on-site built as almost a vault, if you will, underground. So it could have a different construction than what we're used to seeing from a cylindrical type tank, particularly with it being that big. It's possible that it's more vault-like than cylindrical-like. So then they will dig. They'll dig all around. Again, they'll uncover, then they'll dig all of the soil out around it, get to the bottom of it, and then making sure somehow, and Mark can speak to this a little bit too from that perspective, but we need to make sure that there's no volatile vapors that come out of there. So as we're working with this tank process, more than likely it'll have to be cut up in place. And so, as you can imagine, we don't need torches and things of that nature with explosive gases around. So they'll go through a process of making sure that there's no explosive vapors, and then we'll go from there. But Mark or Matt, you guys might have a good idea of how we're going to do that.
Yes, Brian. First of all, I'd like to say we really appreciate the opportunity. I know the town of Morgan quite well. I'm there almost every weekend if possible. I've got a small place up at Lake James, so I love the town. But on the tank, yeah, like Brian discussed, we're not exactly sure how the tank's built, but I'll have equipment there that can basically break up the concrete, process it, and if it's a steel tank, we'll bring a shear in. We'll shear it up, basically like a big pair of scissors. We'll cut the tank up and remove it.
Y'all make it sound easy. That's great.
Yeah. It's a relatively simple process, yes, but it'll end up being involved just because of the sheer size of it and the contents and all of those other kind of things. So, and all of that will be taken off-site for disposal. We won't be leaving it in it. We won't be leaving it there. And we did, during the assessment process, we assessed all around the tank, trying to determine if there were any significant leaks. The tank is fuel oil, which is a heavy fuel, probably number 5 or number 6 fuel oil, which is a very viscous fuel. And so it tends to not mobilize very far. If you think of it as a cold molasses, very thick molasses that's cold, so it doesn't move very far in the subsurface. However, as part of the removal process, if we should encounter soil that's contaminated with fuel oil on the exterior of the tanks, we'll be either stockpiling and removing that soil as well. So it will not remain on site when it's all through. We don't suspect, again, we did assessment all around the tank as we were in that phase, and we didn't find any outside of the tank. I mean, very near the tank. So, but it's always possible that that there could be some in a spot that we just hadn't have access to assess. So we'll be doing that as we go through the process. So I should have mentioned at the end of that, there is going to be a confirmation sampling process at the end of this to make sure that there is no fuel oil contaminated soils left on site or anything of that nature. So
if I remember, and you touched on this, the heavy metals stuff that was found was really negligible, and so none of this would impact the uses after the cleanup is completed. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's correct, Alan. We did find some elevated concentrations of heavy metals across the site, but nothing that was out of the ordinary for, say, what's naturally occurring in Western North Carolina or what we found from a background comparison to the site. So we took an area of the site that had little known industrial activity and compared metals concentrations to that location, and they were all sort of within that type of a range. So, and of course, I think the highest thing from a metals perspective out there was iron, which you'd expect. There was a lot of red soil there, red clay underneath the site. So that's indicative of high iron concentrations as well, but nothing that would preclude the site from its intended future use as TIC intends it. to move forward, correct? Good questions, Alan.
Been through this a few times.
Yeah, you have. Appreciate it.
So do you think the budget is sufficient to allow for all of these items to be covered?
Yes, assuming we don't find something that we weren't anticipating through the process, which we don't anticipate, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And I think it will be sufficient. I should say it's a $500,000 grant from EPA, so it's very generous from EPA, and we're glad that they're a partner on this project as well.
Absolutely, I'll echo that. And just, they were kind of the first agency to come to the table to help get this site cleaned up. So it's really instrumental first bit of funding that we've gotten to make sure this is a safe place for everyone to work and to make this development happen. So we're thrilled that they are selected us as one of their sites for this year. So we're excited to get this moving forward.
Aaron, I think I know the answer to this. It's a little outside of this question, but
Sure.
it's not anticipated that that site would remain or have the potential to be rail active. Is it?
We have not outlined that currently and how the plan is laid. We're still certainly early enough that if that was a good option, we could make that happen still. I think especially as we get to the future phases where we're going to know it's going to be more intense manufacturing space. I think we do anticipate these first two phases to have a little bit more public facing work. So maybe it doesn't make sense for the rail to cut through right there, but given the proximity to the rail, if we could figure out a safe way to incorporate that, we're certainly very open to that discussion.
Well, the reason I ask is North Carolina Railroad does have site development money.
Yeah. That's a good
But
point.
there are stipulations that it has to remain as a rail served site or developed as a rail served site. So it does not come without a few strings.
Certainly, that's fair. Well, that's a great question. Maybe I will talk to them, or I will talk to them on Thursday about that and see what they think given our current plans.
Okay. I didn't mean to hijack it. I just happened to
Oh.
think of it. When you get old like I am, if you don't ask it, you forget it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. That's a great point. Thank you. Do you have any other questions from folks on the call? If not, we can wrap it up. But as both of our contacts are here, both for Brian and I do definitely want to say, if things come up later, anyone has questions, you have friends or family members who you think also might be interested in learning about this, we're going to get this posted up onto our website. So it will be accessible for the public. Anyone who can navigate to that website can watch it, and feel free to send us follow-up questions. We're happy to answer them. We really want to make sure this is a transparent process and don't want to leave any stone unturned. So we thank everyone for their time today.
If you will, send me a link and I'll make sure we link to it on our site as well.
Excellent. Cool. Thank you.
All right.